Okay, joining me today is writer Jim Zub. We're going to be talking about his Starstone Volume 1, Fight or Flight. It was part of the Comixology, the books that were released through Comixology, but now are being released through print through Dark Horse. And Jim is also it's written for Marvel Comics, and I just realized when I was doing my show research that he wrote Glitter Bomb for Animage back in 2016. So I was pretty. For some reason, it just slipped my mind that he wrote that, and I really enjoyed that series. And he just informed me that there was a second miniseries. So let's bring him in. Let's talk about Stone Star Volume 1, and then maybe we'll talk about some other stuff.
Hey, how's it going?
How's it going yourself? How have you been?
I'm doing all right. Yeah.
So before we get into talking about the book, do you remember the first comic that you read, or maybe the one that caught your attention and made you want to read more?
Obviously I grew up, reading the comic strips in the newspaper and stuff like that, but actual comic books, probably the first one I started collecting was the Marvel G.I. Joe series. I was the exact right age for that when the cartoon was coming out and the toys were really big in the early 80s. So I collected the G.I. Joe series. I mean, even previous to that, there was a magazine called the Electric Company, and they had Spider-Man comics in there. Mm-hmm. And so I remember reading those. And then when I saw the advertisements in the G.I. Joe book for Spider-Man comics, I started collecting Amazing Spider-Man. And in the early, probably issue around 230, 231 was my first issue that I bought. And I just collected Spider-Man all the way through. For years and years and years, I was avidly collecting it and then trying to get back issues, but they were really expensive. So I would also get Marvel Tales, mm-hmm. where they would do the reprints of the Amazing Spider-Man issues. Yeah.
And so what made you, want to write comic books?
Right. It was sort of a weird transition. My background's actually in animation. So I'm an artist, and I learned how to do classical animation, worked in the animation industry for several years. But even when I was in college, I love comics, and I've read all kinds of different books over the years, superhero stuff and manga, indie books. But what really kind of drew my attention in terms of the ability to make stuff was web comics. Because what I felt this distance was, I didn't understand how to get into publishing. I didn't know how to get my work in front of publishers. And all of a sudden there was this generation of people, as the internet was really getting rolling, who were putting up their own comics online. All they needed was just a basic website and some HTML, and they could post comics up, multiple times a week or once a week or whatever schedule they worked out. And I realized how immediate that was and how simple it was. And I was becoming an avid fan of a bunch of these kind of web comics. And I thought, well, there's nothing that, the work looks good, but there's nothing stopping me from doing something similar. So in 2001, I started up my own kind of online graphic novel. It was this story called The Makeshift Miracle. And I posted up pages 3 times a week and kind of taught myself the comic form. Mm-hmm. Bit by bit, got more confident with my storytelling, got more confident with how stuff worked. And then a couple years later, I ended up getting attached to this collective of artists called Udon that's based here in Toronto. And they were doing all sorts of different advertising artwork and design work and comic book work. And that just kind of really got me going again in terms of making my own comics. Even after doing the webcomic stuff, once that wrapped up in 2003, I just sort of transitioned to the Udon studio. They were doing comic conventions all the time. They were plugged into a lot of the industry. And it just gave me that extra bit of momentum to get myself going. So I learned tons about publishing, conventions, how this stuff all works. And slowly but surely built up the experience and the head of steam to make my own books and to do a lot more commercial work.
Yeah. So let's talk about Stone Star.
Sure.
The first volume. You're working with Max Dunbar. Now, you worked with him on Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, we worked on a bunch of stuff together. Yep. So we did Dungeons and Dragons. He did a few issues of Champions with me. Mm-hmm. Max and I have known each other quite a while, and we get along amazingly well. So we had been talking about wanting to do a creator-owned book for ages, and this was just all the pieces really came together so well for us to make it work here. So I was really, really thrilled with it.
So can you give us like a summary of, what Stone Star is about and who the main characters are and maybe the inspiration behind it? I know that's like 3 questions at once.
Yeah, it's no problem. Yeah, Stone Star is it's this kind of colorful space fantasy series, and it's almost like the idea of a gladiatorial arena and a traveling circus, but on this huge epic kind of science fiction scale. So Stone Star is a station that's this gladiatorial arena where they entertain people across the universe. But instead of it just being in one planet or one location, it's mobile. So it travels from planet to planet, and wherever it goes, encounters new dangers and problems and stuff like that. So you've got the politics and the trouble and the machinations of the station, and then you've got wherever they're arriving, and these two things kind of come into a collision every single time. You've got a real colorful, varied cast of characters, but our main character is this kind of young, scrappy kid named Dail, who's an orphan on the station, and his father was a fighter back in sort of the heyday of the station, and now he's left on his own and trying to fend for himself, him and his best friend Kitso. And they end up getting pulled into this kind of political intrigue and other things that are happening under the surface of the glitz and glamour of Stone Star. So it's a real kind of mashup of these genres. You've got this space fantasy element to it, this sci-fi kind of thing. You've got your kind of coming of age sort of elements. But then because the gladiatorial arena is this big spectacle, you also have kind of the almost like that sports competition sort of element playing into it as well. Yeah.
And so what were the inspirations behind, the story and the characters?
Right. So it's a real kind of, it's a lot of stuff I love about like shonen manga and anime, where you've got those young kind of teen characters trying to figure themselves out, and they've got big goals and big dreams and all that kind of stuff, mixed with a bit of Gladiator and a bit of like The Last Starfighter or kind of classic funky sci-fi, a little bit of Star Wars. It's sort of a lot of these things that I grew up on or that I'm really inspired by now, kind of mashed together with Max's design sensibility. I wanted to create really a playground for him to be able to generate whatever kind of cool visual stuff he thought about. So, in a universe where we've got aliens and creatures and robots and all these different types of things, he can really go buck wild and just come up with cool visuals and dynamic characters and colorful kind of critters. And we put them all in this arena, in this space station, all interacting with each other and causing trouble. And it's just it's a really fun mix where we can kind of go wild with our imaginations. And
so are there, I would assume that this, because I can't remember exactly how the comicsology thing worked.
Right.
I know that, you guys, it was there first, and now Dark Horse is publishing it.
Right. So in 2019, we launched this as part of the Comicsology Originals line. So it's a whole series of creator-owned books that Comicsology put out and supported digitally first. And so we launched that in 2019. We've actually done a whole second arc of the series that's still available, also on Comicsology Digital. And now Dark Horse has partnered with Comicsology to release a bunch of their those series in print. So this is the first, trade paperback release of Stone Star, and we're obviously, hopeful it's going to do really well in the book market and in comic book shops, and then just keep that momentum going.
And it releases today.
Yes, hey. Yeah, that works out well.
Or yesterday.
Tomorrow for comic shops, but today, it depends on when you're releasing the episode, right? So it's on July 6th in bookstores, July 7th for comic book shops.
Now, was there any, because you've written for, regular print comic books, both, your own for Image and then for Marvel. Was there anything that you had to do differently writing it for like the Comicsology format?
Comicsology, does their digital comics all the time. They do Marvel and everyone else's. So we just followed the same kind of format we would normally. 2-page spreads don't play as well with the digital format. And I know that in the Comicsology interface, it's a little bit of a struggle because you want to have a big epic scope when you pull open that 2-page spread in the print book, but on your digital device, it's going to generally shrink it down. So it sort of has the reverse effect. So we try to avoid 2-page spreads wherever possible. In the Comixology version of the first issue, we format the page differently for that 2-page spread, but now in the print version, we kind of let it blow out the way you'd want to in print. So that's about the only change between the two.
I think when I went through it, I read it, using their panel by panel. Then I, looked at it again through the full page, and it reads well both ways.
Yeah. And, Max's storytelling is so clean and strong. Like, he's just a great, classic kind of comic artist. He's got a great dynamic style. He draws action well. He draws environments and characters well. I can't say enough nice things about him. And then you put someone like Espen Grundahjørn, who's our colorist, just doing a phenomenal job at bringing texture and mood to everything on the page as well.
I was going to say, I love the colors.
Yeah, it's so
very
good.
Yeah.
It's a really, really vibrant series. Yeah.
And have you worked with the colorist before?
Yeah, Espen was at the Udon studio for many years. And so we got to know each other through a bunch of the projects that we did there together on different kind of commercial work and comic book stuff. And I'd always wanted to work with him on a creator-owned book. And again, just the timing worked out really well. Max and I were needing a colorist, and I reached out to him sort of with this, like, do you think you might have some room on your schedule? And it just timed really well with other things he was doing, and he had a blast working on it. So it's great.
Now, do you find yourself, is it easy to write your own stuff, your creator-owned stuff, in addition to like when you're writing Conan?
Right. Like, it's a mixture. I find, they're both can be very enjoyable experiences. It's like they're flexing different creative muscles. Mm-hmm. So when you're working on commercial properties with established, continuity or characters, you have the reference material that you can draw upon, or you have, an editor who's going to give you that feedback and tell you if you're doing it well, or give you that extra insight. But you're in more specific kind of lanes in terms of the way you have to build this stuff. For creator-owned work, the field's a lot more open. You can make what you want. In this case, it's like, I just want to please Max, and I want to make the most exciting thing possible for the two of us that we're going to have fun building. But it can be, you have to provide that structure yourself. You have to really put those, kind of pillars into place and go, okay, these are the priorities. This is what we want to do with the story. But once you feel confident in that, it's such fun to be able to just kind of run wild with it. Whenever I've done the creator-owned books, because I've got this background when I was at the Udon studio as eventually an art director and a project manager, I'm used to putting those kind of limits into place. And so I'll do that with the creator-owned books as well. I meet with the artist and I kind of go, okay, here's what I'm thinking this thing is, but I want your input. I need you to collaborate with me and make this, that couldn't exist without the both of us. And that's so, so important when it comes to the creator-owned stuff, that it's not just like my ideas. It's what's going to get you pumped as an artist, so we can both make something we're super proud of.
How do you feel that Stone Star was received? I mean, it came out at kind of a weird time because, with the pandemic and everything, and being a Comixology
it
property.
Came out pre-pandemic, so it came out 2019. So it was sort of the summer before, and it was part of a whole release of books that they were doing at the time. It was really fun because we were able to control the flow of it, like when it was coming out. And we ended up, when we announced the book, we did a surprise. We announced it and released it digitally the same day, which you just can't do with print, And so it was fun to be able to put it out in that kind of format and surprise people with the release of the book. Max and I did both WonderCon and San Diego Comic-Con with Comixology, and we're able to do the show and promote it. At San Diego was particularly amazing because they made up these cool little metallic pins that we were handing out to people on the show floor, and they had the digital code, so you could just go right to the story and check it out. But it was a really cool experience. But I am such a big, print comic fan. And so I know a lot of other people are too. Like, they prefer stuff to be in print, and, the fidelity of that is really nice to see. And so having it in print now at Dark Horse is ideal. It's wonderful to have that book on my shelf and to be able to, show people and get it out to that other audience as well.
And you said that Volume 2 is already, or the books for Volume 2 are out. Is it? Yep. Is this going to be a ongoing story?
Yeah, so we've got plans to continue it after too. So I'm excited and hopeful, in terms of our scheduling on that. I know Max is right now doing a Batman story over at DC. And so once he wraps that up, we're hopeful to be able to dive into more.
And so where does Volume 1 leave off and where does 2 pick up, just in general terms? Because I haven't got to the second volume yet.
Right. So, the first volume is about sort of setting the table, like setting up all the important ingredients and the elements. What is this place? Who are the main players? How do they know each other? And how are they pulled into each other's kind of gravity with the drama that unfolds? And so one of the big decisions that Dail has to make is whether or not he's going to follow in the footsteps of his father and be a gladiator. Part of him wants to, and part of him is terrified because of the things that have happened in the past and the things he kind of knows about the controversies bubbling under the surface of Stone Star. And at the end of Volume 1, he's made that decision. I don't want to spoil it for people, but he's got a focal point and a direction that he's going to go in. And so Volume 2 is really about moving that forward and him finding out the hard way, what those decisions mean. And while at the same time, it gives us a chance to broaden and show in depth a little bit more of the cast. So you'll get to know Volness and you get to know Kakani, the other characters that are close to him, and what drives them and why they're on the station and what they want to do as well. And so, as the series goes forward, we've got our main character, but everyone starts to broaden and become deeper. And some of the expectations, and I think, some of the kind of tropes that we've set up in the first volume, we can kind of deconstruct them a bit and surprise readers with what these characters are really all about and a little bit more depth and emotion to them.
Now, I realize that, all the characters in the book are, somehow influenced by your experience, but is there one character in the book that you just enjoy writing the most, or you want to see
sure
spotlighted?
Volness, the kind of grizzled old mentor figure, is tons of fun to write. He's like this kind of bitter Clint Eastwoody, he's been around way too long and seen way too much, and he's kind of frustrated with his own lot in life, and he wants to impart that knowledge, to the kids, but also a warning, for them as well about what can happen, particularly if they turn towards a similar type of path that he's gone on. And so I find the curmudgeonly stuff fun to write. I like the attitude that it brings, and he's not a humorous character, but he kind of cuts through everything else in a way that becomes funny. And so I find that, he doesn't react in big emotional ways to anything. So absolutely crazy stuff's happening. And he's just this even keel, very bitter, kind of grim dude. And there's a nice contrast. There's a humor that comes out of that as well.
I think one of my favorite scenes with him was where he it's the guard with the one eye and he just kind of lays into him.
Oh yeah, totally. Right. Like, and what's great about it is, Max is so good at drawing action that I can kind of leave a lot of that in his hands. I'm just like, look, in this scene, we want to have something totally badass and amazing happen. This character looks really cool by the end of it, and so gets injured. Yeah. And Max is like, leave it to me. I got this all figured out. And he just does such a good job with it. It's amazing.
So, like I mentioned in the intro, I noticed that I realized that you wrote Glitter Bomb, and I think that was probably at the time when I was like reading a lot of Image, because I was just looking for that next book that I really liked. Well, I'm always looking for the next Transmetropolitan.
Sure, yeah, a creator-owned book that's got something new and unexpected, and characters that grab you. Absolutely, yeah. Image has had such a run of cool stuff, like and particularly right around that period, like everywhere from, I'd say the sweet spot really is like 2013 to 2018. They're just putting out so much cool stuff and unexpected material from new creators, or kind of material from longtime creators that's kind of taps into what they love best,
And I noticed that you've mostly done creator-owned stuff and worked with Marvel, and I think I saw you did a couple of DC books. I think you did
just a couple small ones.
The Amanda Waller Suicide Squad.
That's right. Yeah, I did a Suicide Squad one shot. I've done a Legends of the Dark Knight story, and I did another Suicide Squad story quite a while ago that got released recently in that miniseries they just did called Let Them Live, which is like older projects that for whatever reason weren't released and finally have been published.
So I don't know if you can, but are there any DC characters that you would really like to get your hands on and explore?
Yeah, absolutely. I really love everyone loves the Bat family, right? But Batgirl in particular I think would be a lot of fun. Harley Quinn would be a blast. I really enjoyed writing her in Legends of the Dark Knight and in Suicide Squad. She's awesome. And then the other character is probably Green Arrow. I think there's a lot of potential there. And Ollie, the nice thing is he's a known quantity, particularly after the run of the TV show, but he's not as kind of stuck in his ways or monolithic in the way of a Batman or a Wonder Woman or a Superman, where I feel like he's got some more flexibility. You could mess around with him more. Yeah.
And so do you have any, again, I don't know if you can say, but do you have any other creator-owned stuff in the works or,
Yeah, absolutely. Max and I obviously want to do more Stone Star, but we've been talking about other potential projects as well. I'm chatting with a couple other artists about potential future projects. I'm really well known now for Sword and Sorcery. So between, Skull Kickers and Pathfinder, Samurai Jack and Dungeons and Dragons, and now Conan the Barbarian, I've really kind of got a head of steam for the Sword and Sorcery thing. And so I would love to do a new, creator-owned fantasy book at some point. I'm just trying to figure out what shape and, the timing of that.
When you can find the time between everything else.
Yeah, exactly. Totally.
So is there anything else you wanted to say about the book that maybe, we didn't cover? Or?
Sure. I mean, like Stone Star is what I love about working on it is it's really easy to jump into. There's all sorts of amazing kind of characters. And I think that, people may know my work or they may know Max's work, but it's fun to see us kind of unleashed in the sense that we don't have any kind of limits whatsoever. And seeing Max's design work in particular, one of the things I'm most proud of in the book is in the back of the book, there's a ton of back matter, something like I think 12 or 15 pages of concept pieces. So you can really see Max going through that design process and kind of solving those design problems and coming up with cool iconic characters. And that's the kind of back matter and the kind of behind the scenes stuff that I love to see. And I hope readers get a lot out of it as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see what you're going to continue to do in your own little sandbox that you've created. Because I mean, I think I started reading the volume or the comic one night as I was in bed, and I don't think I went to sleep till I was almost 3/4 of the way through it.
Nice.
So it grabbed me, and I was tired the next morning, but it was well worth it.
Awesome. Well, that's good to hear. The sleepy part aside, I'm glad it grabbed you and it's entertaining. I'm really pumped, to get that feedback from readers and to get it in the hands of people who wouldn't have seen it outside of the comic shops.
So is there anything that you're, reading now, watching that, you would recommend that people should check out? Or do you just kind of, or do you kind of keep into your own little bubble to?
Right. For the Marvel stuff, I'm constantly keeping up on the latest Marvel series. And, I love what's going on in Daredevil and Black Widow right now. I think those are both really sharp series. Thor's really good and Fantastic Four. I'm on TV stuff. I'm a little bit behind, but the new season of Rick and Morty just started up and it's sharp as always. I'm always surprised at how intensely good the writing is on that series and their ability to keep you guessing about what's coming next. Surprising no one, I'm watching WandaVision and Loki and all the kind of Marvel stuff as it's rolling down the pipe. But otherwise, digging into a lot of the older prose stuff, rereading the original Conan stories from Robert E. Howard, because it's always good to sort of permeate yourself, in the canon and just make sure it's at the front of your mind when you're writing the characters. All kinds of stuff like that.
And is there anything about writing Conan that you kind of find easy, or are there any elements that you want to make sure that your interpretation
Right.
kind of.
I mean, the character at the heart of a lot of the Robert E. Howard stories is this sort of push and pull about civility and savagery. This idea that, just because people have built these amazing cities or have these cultures, these governments, doesn't mean that they're civilized, doesn't mean that they treat each other well or that they're moral. And, Conan, whenever he enters these environments, he's always kind of shaking things up. He's always bringing kind of transformation, sometimes very, very violent transformation in the way that things go. And so that theme kind of runs through a lot of my stories because I feel like it's at the heart of a lot of the best Conan stories. But there's ways of how can you mix up how you deliver it? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, just because that's an iconic theme doesn't mean you can just go to the well the exact same way, the exact same, over and over again. So you've got to constantly be switching it up or putting Conan in new environments or unexpected situations where he can't just cut his way out. He can't just, kill his way to the finish line. And that's where I find the most challenge. But when I'm able to strike upon those ideas, they generate story, right from the get-go.
And Conan is one of those books that I really haven't, been following, but but I've noticed that you kind of are able to jump around in time. Am I right?
Yeah. There's sort of three core eras of the character, right? So you've got him in his youth and some of the earliest stories in terms of the timeline. You've got him in his prime and a lot of the Queen of the Black Coast stuff with him and Belit and on the Tigris and all this kind of stuff. And then you've got him, King Conan, right? And so in his later days and all that kind of stuff. And some stories can kind of float between those, but in general, those are the three sort of pillars of time that most of the authors are working with. And so I started my run on the flagship book a little bit younger because I wanted him to be more impetuous and diving into danger a little bit more, going to new places for the first time and sort of having those experiences. And it was a lot of fun to write those aspects of it. And then for the upcoming big anniversary issue we've got this fall, so the legacy numbering of Conan is going to hit issue 300. I wanted to do a story of him in his prime and him on the high seas and this sort of stuff. So it was fun to be able to move the timeline forward a little bit and jump into this real classic era and try and bring something new to the mix.
All right. Well, I think we've kind of reached the time limit. I said I'd keep you. So
sure.
Sorry. So where can people, what books are you currently writing? Where can people find you on social media? Pitch the, book again.
Sure. Yeah. So the easiest place to find me is just jimzub.com. So JIMZUB.com. I've got obviously previews and interviews and reviews and all kinds of stuff there. I've also got tutorials in terms of how to write your own comics, how to pitch your ideas to publishers, a lot of common questions that I get about the industry and what it's like to work in comics. That I answer there and try and just demystify the process for people. Currently on deck, I've obviously got Stone Star, just been released in trade paperback. Even though we created that back in 2019, it's awesome to have it out in print. I'm currently writing Conan the Barbarian. I'm also writing this upcoming Avengers series called Avengers Tech On, which is a partnership between Marvel and Bandai Japan, and it's really fun and full of amazing designs. The Stranger Things and Dungeons and Dragons trade paperback also comes out the same day as Stone Star, and that's a miniseries I did last year, tying into the TV show on Netflix and showing you more of the kids playing Dungeons and Dragons and how their fictional characters kind of relate to their real lives, which was a ton of fun to put together. And then on top of that, I'm also one of the writers of an event being done over at Vault for Vampire the Masquerade and Werewolf the Apocalypse called World of Darkness Crimson Thaw. And I'm really pumped for people to read that. The book looks really awesome, and it's a world that I haven't been able to delve into before. And I'm really pumped for people to check it out.
And I know the convention scenes are starting back up. Are you going to be anywhere, or are you just kind of laying low for?
I'm on the cusp of I've got some offers on the table. I'm sort of rolling around and trying to decide which ones I want to go to. Obviously, a lot more limited schedule than usual. In a typical year before the pandemic, I would do anywhere between 12 to 15 conventions a year. And so I might do 1 or 2 this fall, just trying to figure out where and when.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for coming on. And if I ever see you out at one of the conventions, I mainly go to New York and Baltimore when I do conventions.
Nice. Well, hopefully I will see you there.
Well, I don't think I'm going to be doing this year because we still have a 4-year-old who still hasn't been, able to be
vaccinated, of course.
Vaccinated, so we're still playing it safe till he's safe. So
of course.
But I hope I get to see you one of these days, and whenever you have another volume 2 comes out and you want to come back, or you have one of your other projects, would love to have you back. And
sure,
I definitely want to check out the Stranger Things and Dungeons and Dragons, because that seems like a very interesting
something up your alley. I hope you check it out.
Yeah,
awesome.
So I want to thank you for coming on. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll let you know when this comes out.
All right, thank you kindly.
All right.